Hey everybody, this is Tim Charron, and welcome to my brand new podcast called The Charron Zone. Blah, 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 blah. Welcome everybody to the podcast. This is The Charron Zone, and I am here with the Smidge. So we're going to talk about vagabonding. I'm reading the book Vagabonding right now, and Tim Ferriss, if you guys have listened to Tim Ferriss or you know who he is, he took the Vagabonding book around the world with him when he basically went off the grid and traveled for 16 months straight while running his business, but paring his business way down and scaling it down for himself so he didn't have to work so many hours. And he wrote the 4-hour work week in that process of traveling and all that stuff. So vagabonding is basically long-term travel, you know, instead of going away to on a vacation for a week or two. It's basically living somewhere else, whether it's living in just traveling for a month to 6 months to a year to 5 years or whatever. Also, you know, you could be working some of that time. You'd be working overseas. You could be working, you know, to pay for part of it. But what we're going to talk about today is what we're always going to talk about on this podcast, hopefully, and that's shit that we know.
Oh, I like that.
Right. So here's what I don't like. I'm just going to talk about stuff that I don't like real quick. I don't like when people talk about stuff that they don't know about, right?
Right.
So what I want to do with this podcast is either talk to and interview people. Oh, thanks, Jody. I like that.
Oh, thank you.
I
was worried about that.
For anyone who's listening on the podcast itself, we're also doing a Facebook Live. So when we are answering people, it doesn't, you know who we're speaking to. We're speaking to people that are posting on Facebook Live.
Right. Maybe we should say what the question was and then answer it. So those.
Well, Jody said that we look great because we're on Facebook Live and she can see us.
Jody.
Thank you, Jody. You're the best. Now you're going to be on the podcast. So you have to check out the podcast on iTunes and subscribe to it. So what I was saying is part of the reason to do the podcast is to interview people that are really good at what they do and we can all learn from. And also for me and us to talk about things that we know about, which is on this podcast, it's going to be about basically full-time travel, but long-term travel and kind of getting off the grid, whether that's abroad or in your own country, which obviously our country is the United States of America. But another reason why we're doing this is because we're working on me doing a tour in Australia. So that's another thing that just came up. I've been working on it with some great people for about a year and a half, and Smidge's brother lives in Australia. He's stationed there. So we're putting together a 3-week or 1-month tour where we're going to work and, you know, travel. Not really a vacation because we're going to really travel like hardcore. But so anyway, so that's the reason, you know, one of the reasons to do the podcast is talk to people that know what they're talking about and know what they're doing and basically have experience in doing all these things. So that's why we're talking to you, young lady, because you and I have some experience with long-term travel.
Exactly. For the past 10 years, that's exactly what Tim and I have done. 10. We have, up until 6 months ago, traveled full-time, lived in different places, a maximum of 6 months is, I think,
the most we've ever lived in one place.
That we've lived in one place,
in the past
and
6
we
years.
only did that maybe twice.
Yeah, so basically, for about 10 years, we moved to Nashville. We moved away from where we originally lived, which I was living in Miami Beach. Smidge was living in the Florida Keys, where she's from, and we moved to Nashville, and then pretty much immediately started to wander, for lack of a better word. We traveled for 10 years, living on people's couches at first, living in the just all over the place, in New England and California, in Nashville, in South Florida, in the Keys. And we basically we haven't had a year-long lease in 10 years.
Right. And the way that we did it is that obviously Tim had his music, I had my business. So we would go from place to place working and being able to live in all of these different areas and really experience them and determine where we liked. We did Nashville, we did Costa Rica, we did the Keys, we've done Miami Beach, we've done New England, where else? California.
And multiple times in each of those areas. So the coolest thing about it that I found is that we got to really see what it's like to live in all of these different places for a month, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, and work there and meet people there, and then see where we like the most. And we were basically, we haven't had a permanent address. So some of the things that you can do, what are some of the things that you can do if you're thinking about, let's just say, going either disconnecting or going away for 6 months somewhere?
Well, for mail, we have a virtual mailbox set up so that mail goes to the virtual mailbox. For example, if we get checks in the mail, they go to the virtual mailbox and they actually deposit our checks into our bank for us. We do a lot of change of address forms.
Mm-hmm.
What else? Obviously, everything we have set up is mobile. So we have a mobile printer and scanner because we need to have that. We have, obviously, our laptops. What else? The hardest part, I think, for us was the moving all of your stuff from one place to the other. It was very stressful. And you have to pack everything up, and then you have to go to your new place and unpack everything. But we figured it out. Sometimes we would ship stuff to the new address. We always knew where we were going. But we figured it out. And you just have to be very organized, plan your day, plan your trip. I think that's
plan
the most
your
important
life.
thing.
Oh,
Yeah.
really every day, every week, planning your life. So if someone is thinking of doing this long term in the States, then the great thing that we did was, so if, for instance, what we would do is at the end of a season, we would go up to New England to do the concert season, my tour season, and it would be September or October, and we would know that we were done, say October 15th. Then we would be like, oh, okay, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to go back to Nashville? For how long? Blah, blah, blah. But because we didn't have a lease or anything, it would be great because we could be like, you know what? Why don't we go to Costa Rica for 2 months?
Mm-hmm.
And then we would just plan that at the end of the tour. We didn't have to pay, a few $1,000s a month for rent, so we could use that money. So if you take $2,000, for example, and you go to Costa Rica, you can spend half of that and get an amazing place in Costa Rica on top of a
for $1,000
mountain overlooking the ocean for $1,000 a month. So that's one of the basic concepts of vagabonding. And if you get the book Vagabonding or the 4-Hour Work Week, it's like pick a place where there are so many, especially Central America, South America, India, Thailand, and all those areas where you can go and you can spend a quarter of what you spend in the U.S. for that amount of time, and you'll be either saving money or living really, really well. So, and that's exactly what we did with like Costa Rica and stuff like that. So when we go on trips, we would be able to go for a long time because we weren't paying rent.
Right. Exactly.
And what else? Any questions about this stuff?
Any questions about vagabonding?
If you have any questions, post them on YouTube. If you have any questions right now, post them right here on Facebook. on Facebook Live.
Are we still sideways? No, right?
We're trying to check our Facebook Live. What's going on with our feed? Let me know if you guys can still see us. Okay, so what else did you want to go over on this subject?
For vagabonding.
Okay.
Let's see. I guess you just have to really figure out where you want to go. And oh, we're not sideways, and we're good. Oh, okay. So it must be us on there. So, I mean, you know, my parents did it with us, my brother and I, and a dog and a cat and a bird, living on a boat. We used to travel all over the place. It's just, you have to figure out what it is that you want to do. Even just traveling. I mean, people have found ways to go and do all of these things long-term traveling, even if they have jobs, whatever it is. It's, everybody has different forms of vagabonding, basically.
Yeah.
You know, but that was
the way
we did it.
Some of the best things about doing it is, especially when you go to a different country, like in Costa Rica, we were there for a long enough time to really meet people and get to know the locals. And I got to study for very inexpensive. I went to a school for Spanish, and it was right on the ocean. It was just such a beautiful setting, and it was a great way to learn, especially if you're learning another language. You know, what better circumstance than to go and do it in a country that speaks that language, and then you're really immersed in it because you can use it the whole time that you're there as well. So, and those things are really attainable because you're going to places that have a great exchange rate or very low cost of living compared to the U.S. So you come here, you go there with your money from the U.S. and it gets you really, really far. So it's a really cool way to not so much go on vacation, but to actually travel and really
experience those places. Learn the culture. Even in the U.S., I mean, the culture here is so different wherever you go. The food, the people. You know, the U.S. is, South Beach is completely different than anywhere else in the U.S.
Than Rhode Island or
the
Nashville.
Keys, where I'm from, is completely different than anywhere in the U.S. Rhode Island is definitely completely different than the U.S. And you just kind of learn all of these different things and get to take all of these cool, like, cultures and, like, ways of communicating, not just language, but just, like the Latin culture that we always talk about. We didn't grow up with it, but, you get to do a kiss on the cheek and a hug when you meet somebody, even for the first time. And
we're both kind of Latin culture obsessed. When I moved down here to Miami Beach the first time, and I lived here full time, I just got totally engrossed in the Latin culture, and I had a bunch of Latino friends, and I just got into the music because a lot of my friends were producers and songwriters. So I love the Latin culture, and Smidge here Vagabonded lived in Mexico for over a year in a little hut. Why don't you just tell a little bit about that?
So in my younger days, I lived in a hut with what I call my Mexican grandma. I had dirt floor, no running water, no electricity, cooked on a fire, had to go get firewood, had to go get my water from an underground spring, and then carry it in buckets up and warm it up if I wanted to take a bath in a tub.
It's like living a few hundred years ago,
Oh, yeah.
No electricity, obviously, no.
Washing your clothes on rocks. I ended up not doing that because I was too lazy.
They would, if you wanted to have chicken for dinner, you'd have to go and kill a chicken.
Yeah.
I mean, these things are invaluable, especially those experiences. For me to come from Rhode Island and live in South Beach, even just full time as a normal person, and not traveling around all over the place was incredibly invaluable for me. I feel like I grew up here because I learned so much about different cultures here, and then I traveled all over the world when I lived here because I met all these people from all over the world, and that also took me, because I was a personal trainer, so I had some clients that took me around the world to train them. So, if you're interested in any of this kind of stuff, then, send us a message or something, because, life is short, and to be able to experience stuff like living in a hut for over a year with your little Mexican family, it makes you who you are. And I think that's an invaluable experience that a lot of people don't get to get these days. So hopefully we can just kind of open people's eyes to the fact that you can even do this. You can do it right here in your own country. You can do it in so many different places around the world. It's because, let me say this, one reason why we can do this around the world and in this country is because we have freedom that we don't even realize. We don't realize, everybody's bitching and complaining about everything in this country. And we are so spoiled. We are so rich. Anybody who's watching this on their phone you're richer, more wealthy than most of the world. I mean, poverty is, when you go, I traveled to Venezuela. I always tell this story, and I'm not going to belabor it, but I traveled to Venezuela back in 1998, right before Chavez was elected, literally the week that the elections were. And I met people that couldn't choose what they were going to study in school. Can you imagine? You can't, because you're American. You can't imagine that. You just think, okay, well, I want to get a job going to do this, so I'm going to go and do this. I want to go to school to be a doctor or whatever, an X-ray tech, whatever. But you can't do that in a lot of countries. And the fact that people in this country say, well, there's a lot of places that are free, or a lot of countries that are free, that is true. But the U.S. has I don't even know how to say it, the most freedom in the world. I met people. We were in the middle of the mountains hiking for hours, and I ran across people living in shacks.
And that's just a way of life. That's not, to them, like, the poorest of poor here in the United States would be a dream for those people.
Well,
to live in a what we would consider a shack here would be a mansion to them. I always tell you, I have a friend that was like, I'd rather be poor in the United States than rich in Mexico. It's just the way that it is here. So you have to definitely appreciate being an American or living in America and taking advantage of all of the resources that you have available to you.
And it most certainly doesn't mean that you need to agree with everything that every American politician does. Right. It has nothing to do with it. But I just want to let people know that they should do the research or do the traveling so that you can understand how amazing we all have it. And so many other people in the world as well, that have free societies. But so my point was that take advantage of the fact that you are an American and that you can very easily go to all of these other countries, and you can go and live in Costa Rica for 2 months for next to nothing. I mean, do it. Do it.
Absolutely.
Do it.
Even just when you vacation, don't go to the resorts. Don't go to the places that are going to cater to you and be all Americanized. You have to get out and meet people and see how they live. Try the foods. I mean, there's just so much out there that you can't even imagine. We're like we were saying, you take it for granted here, and sometimes you have to suffer a little bit, like we've done.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been homeless. I've been really homeless in the past, and you have to suffer to enjoy what you have and to
make sacrifices.
Exactly. Yeah. So our time, I think, we're way past.
Okay. All right, guys, let me know if you have any questions and you want us to address anything in our next podcast. So either post them on YouTube, because we're going to put this video on YouTube, or post them on Facebook Live, or where else? You guys can email me at nashvillehits@yahoo.com.
Yep.
Anything else?
We are good.
All right.
We're going to go
Thanks.
for a walk on the beach.